Hey guys, so we're going to meet with the CEO of Matcha Bar. We're going to ask some questions.
Talk about the business.
Talk about how they came up and how they've become really big now. They're in LA, they're in New York, they're at all the festivals and stuff. We're gonna go to Brooklyn. We're gonna go to his office and yeah.
Let's go.
Right here. You just say whatever. I really want to try this first though.
Shake it up.
Shake it up?
So it's an apple ginger. It's like a Fuji apple juice. A little ginger has like a nice little spice in it. I don't know if you guys noticed, but if you take a look at all the bottles, all of them have like funny little sayings.
Yeah. That's a little. Yeah.
So the concept for the new bottle was to kind of reinvent. Like you guys remember like the sample fact?
Yeah. Snapping it inside.
Exactly. So the idea was to put it on the outside.
Oh,
and every time. We do have something inside,
yeah.
But every time you go to the shelf, these will continue to change. So essentially, like every 3 months, when we do a production run, we're working with like comedians, copywriters, and for the next run, like artists, comedians, to do like their own versions of it.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So like we have one for Labor Day that's like mint matcha can rock white after Labor Day.
Yeah.
I don't know what you guys got here. A little Twitter shout out. And there's like you can see on here the other ones. We have like a little Trump one.
All right.
Apple ginger's nutrition facts are an alternative.
Yeah. I actually really like it. So before we really get into all the questions, can you just tell us like your story, like your come up, where you're from, like how you got to this point and everything?
So yeah, born and raised in New York. My come up started on the Upper West Side, going to school. Quickly decided I never wanted to leave New York, so I went to college after NYU. From a young age, was always kind of interested in like the entrepreneurial world. When I was 17, I started a music business, throwing events in the world of music, which is how I met you. Started booking parties throughout New York, some couple hundred, some couple thousand, depending on what we were doing. Fell in love with the idea of creating a community more than anything. You know, obviously there's a brand, but what pushes any brand is like a group of people that care about each other. So my come up was like in the music world. It's how I met JP, which is how we got connected. It's how I met a lot of the people I work with to this day. So it was kind of going to school and then working in the music scene here in New York. When I was probably like 20, 21, I started becoming obsessed with the idea of energy. For me, I was going to school, I was working, I had a side job. I call that like the New York hustle, right? Everyone has their own version. Whether you guys are doing a show like this while you're going to school, while you're juggling a summer job, like everyone has their own version of it. For me, I became like really interested in this idea of like energy. You know, what are the energy sources? There's coffee, there's Red Bull, energy drinks, Monster. There's all sorts of legal and illegal drugs, whether it's Ritalin or all the other terrible things kids are getting into. And then of course there's sleep. Those are the 3 ways to get energy. And so for me, I became really interested in why there weren't other alternatives. For me, sleep worked well, but the other 3s did not, you know? So I kind of went on a personal journey in trying to figure out why is this such an underserved category? And that's when I found matcha, looking for an alternative. Like I had a moment where I was like, no longer gonna drink coffee and Red Bull, like I'm done. Some of it was personal, you know, some people love the way coffee makes them feel, and I'm like, keep doing that. Like if it works for you, like by all means. But there's a huge portion of the population that continue to do these things even though it doesn't work with their system. Coffee's super acidic. That's like why it stains your teeth. A lot of people say that, you know, it fucks with your stomach a little bit. And matcha happened to be an alkaline.
When did you first have matcha?
Probably now 4 or 5 years ago. It was in the East Village. I'm always super upfront. I was with my brother and we went to a tea shop and we're like, dude, like we're done with coffee. Like, what do you got? And they're like, I had matcha. It's like, no idea what you're talking about. So first day had matcha, was totally blown away with how it made me feel, and like the rest is history.
What is it made of?
Yeah.
Is it unique? How do you make it?
Yeah. So matcha, on a just really simple level, green tea leaves ground into fine powder.
Really?
So like most people hear that and they're like, all right, like that makes sense. Like I know what green tea is, I know what grinding something is, I know what a powder is. Like I got it. Now if you go dig a little deeper, the first thing you'll realize is matcha is only made with specific green tea leaves. They're the highest quality from the top of the leaf. They're shade grown. There are like intricacies into matcha. Like for example, right before the harvest, they cover all the leaves with what we call like a tarp, these black nets, right? It blocks out about 80% of the sunlight. And when I went to Japan, I was like, it doesn't make sense. Why would you block the sunlight right before harvest? It's almost like, why would you starve someone right before a fight? It didn't make sense. And the science behind it's really cool. They explain it to me like this. Like, you say if you're, every day they use ramen. You have 3 bowls of ramen, but for us it's a sandwich. Say every day you get 3 sandwiches. If all of a sudden you only get given 1 sandwich, you're not going to die. Your body sure will lose weight, I'm sure you'll be more tired, but your body's just going to start cranking down, working as hard as it can to keep you alive. Because of course your body always does that. So it's almost like a mind trick where they trick the plant into working really, really hard. And so in that last month, the baby leaves on the top of the plant that are grown have like a shit ton of caffeine, antioxidants, and other amino acids. But what's unique about it is that it actually has the same caffeine as a shot of espresso, about 80 milligrams. And then you'd probably be like, well, what's so different about it? The difference is the caffeine in matcha is released over 3 to 4 hours. So rather than hitting you all at once, and then a crash, it's actually being slowly released. Say if it's 80 total, it's 20 milligrams. So over a longer period of time, you're getting caffeine, but not as much all at once.
Yeah.
And that's why you're not kind of getting that
That's why there's no crash.
That's why there's no crash, and that's also why you don't have that you have an espresso shot and all of a sudden you're like, oh.
Yeah.
The second thing I noticed is that it also felt really calm. And if you look at the back of the bottle, I spell it out, but there's an amino acid called L-theanine. It's found in all teas, but in very high concentration in matcha. L-theanine is known as a natural calming agent. What it does is it increases your alpha brainwave activity. It allows you to focus and process more, and so as a result, you're more calm. When it's kind of common sense, but if you're plugged in, if you're in the zone and focused on something, usually you're in like a nice calm flow state, whether that's playing music, whether you're DJing, whether you're a basketball player in the zone with the ball. Usually a lot of people report that they're in this like nice calm flow state of activity. So the L-theanine combined with the caffeine is what we like to sum up as a better energy. We always joke that like we're New Yorkers, so it's not about like getting too complicated. It was just better, and that's why we started drinking it. The last thing, of course, is it has a lot of antioxidants, and if you're working hard, you gotta stay healthy. So that's obviously like a big thing.
Okay, so moving on. So Matcha Bar started out as a small startup here in Brooklyn, right? And soon it turned into an upcoming franchise with 3 stores now in Brooklyn, Chelsea, Manhattan, and Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Correct. And on top of that, you sell bottled matcha, and you're at huge featured music festivals like Coachella, Gov Ball. I actually saw you at Gov Ball.
Yeah.
Last year, that was really
Be
fun.
there next week.
Yeah. So how are you able to expand your business to this point, and how will you continue to do that?
Yeah, definitely. So right now we have a store in Chelsea, we have one in Silver Lake, we're about to open up another in LA this summer, and then we're actually going to be opening up something down in Soho, which is really cool. Our store in Brooklyn, which is our original store, actually just closed down. Our lease came up, we weren't able to renew the lease, so we're now looking for another home. Which was a bummer, but part of life, things happen. So they're redeveloping the whole block into like office buildings. But so we have 2 stores now, soon to be 4, and we're expanding out. So my vision for the brand was always about this kind of bottle. Why? I think like a lot of culture in America is driven by convenience. So it's always going to make more sense to have a bottle available across the country than to have a cafe available across the country. Why? Matcha is still very niche. As big as it's getting, It's definitely not coffee. It's definitely not ice cream. Yeah, there's a reason Starbucks can have literally stores all over the place. You know, you put a Matcha Bar in Atlanta, like, I don't know if it would do too hot. Maybe in a couple of years, but right now it'd be like a tough sell. And my grandma's down there, so I know that. So, you know, you might think like, oh, it's a really cool idea. We weren't the first to do it. Like, think of a brand like Ben & Jerry's. Like, everyone remembers, I don't know if you've ever been to them. Like, I have a memory of going into like a Ben & Jerry's store and getting to try like all the flavors and seeing the wallpaper with the cows and like having this story of like, oh, like Ben & Jerry in Vermont, you know, the two boys making all the cool ice cream. So similarly, we decided we were gonna have this story of two brothers, and it's true, it's me and my older brother, you know, opening these cafes in New York and then in LA and eventually in other cities, where we're able to educate and tell people our story and share all sorts of fun flavors. And then, like you said, a big platform for us was all about the saying that's on the inside of the cat, and you guys see it, good things come to those who hustle. For me, my whole belief since day one was all about the hustle. And good things come to those who hustle is not good things come to those who hustle, and drink matcha. It's really like my belief for everyone. If you do good work, good shit's gonna happen to you. We decided that it would be a really cool idea for us to have a whole component of our brand where we're going out of the store and bringing what we think is a better energy to places where you need energy. In the beginning, we usually had to offer to give them free product, but now usually like we're selling the product at all these places. So it makes sense for us. So yeah, so that was where it started. And then a year ago we launched the bottle. We're now sold throughout all of New York and all up and down the West Coast and San Fran and New York and San Diego. And as of September, we're going to be rolling out nationally, which is really cool.
So you said that you got the word out about matcha with your pop-up stores.
Yeah.
Since YouTube is a social media platform, how do you think social media has impacted Matcha Bar?
Yeah, I always joke that if we had started 2 years before, we would have gone out of business, like 100%. Even when in 2014 when we launched, Facebook and Instagram, they were there, but it was also not where it is today.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't like, they were not like, you know, a good like section of our, you know, generation, like whose job it is just to work social media. So it was actually a little easier to make some inroads. It's tough to keep up now, you guys know. It's like a full-time, you know, job.
So moving on, at what point did you realize that Matcha Bar could be something like really big? And also just like a follow-up to that, also when did you start seeing a major growth in the company, like popularity growth and like monetary growth as well?
Yeah, I mean, in the world of small business, popularity and monetary are like years away. You love for them to be at the same time, and they're usually not. Popularity, you know, I mean, I think the first 3 months we opened, we were like, we're definitely gonna go out of business. It was like, you know, really slow days. People are like, what's matcha? Do you guys have any coffee? But slowly but surely, it started to change. We opened in Brooklyn. We were right near Vice. You know, they had 500 employees. Like, you know, I'm sure you guys know, like, there's some of like the more forward-thinking media companies in the world. That's a great person to be next to. We were next to a bunch of nightclubs. Musicians, you know, another great. So we kind of positioned ourselves in a really nice space where we had a lot of local support. And I'd say that a year into when we opened, there started to be a real swell of interest. We opened up our second store about a year and a half after we opened our first in Chelsea. That's when we saw, oh, okay, people in Brooklyn and people in Manhattan like it. We started getting interest for our bottled product. So I would say like about a year into what we were doing, we saw there was a real opportunity, and that's why we made like a pretty huge push to open up the West Coast.
Okay, so finally, our last question. Do you have any advice for young entrepreneurs with the same ambitions of starting their own business?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing is always find something you're like legitimately passionate about. Try not to look for like a lucrative concept. What I would call like a lucrative concept, for example, if you come up with an idea and you're like, wow, no one's doing this, I'm gonna kill it, I'm gonna make a lot of money, but your heart's not in it, like not worth the time. Because at the end of the day, there's gonna be a period, and for me it was like a year, where I was stuck working at my own cafe 7 days a week, like mopping the floors, cleaning the toilets. And there are many times where you're like, Jesus, like, are you kidding me? Like, this is like beyond miserable. Like, this is exhausting. And then you have moments where a customer comes in and they have this amazing experience with matcha and their whole lives change, and you're like, oh, like that was amazing. Like, this is why I do it. But you're gonna have those bad moments. And so like my advice to anyone getting into entrepreneurship is like, always like understand the fact that if you're not down to like stomach like a bunch of bad days, like it might not be like the best idea to like get into it. And I'm always super upfront about that. You know, even now we have months that are super tough, especially as we're growing a business. The more opportunity, the more challenges. In terms of how to get started, it's always about looking around you and trying to find resources and mentors. Like for me, it was finding one other guy I knew had started a company and just taking him to dinner and saying, can I look at what your business plan looked like? Can you tell me how it worked? And you know, all of a sudden I had a skeleton of a business plan. It was about, you know, nothing to do with tea, it had to do with clothes, but I deleted all the things in it and I started putting in like, oh, well, you know, this is my marketing statement and this is and you know, going through the motions of like creating whatever that plan might be. I think like the most important thing when you're starting any company is creating like a rigid structure. So like if you have an idea, that's fine, but then you need a plan. When I started the business officially, put money in and signed and decided this is what we were gonna do, we made a 5-year plan of, in the best case scenario, what would happen. And we just opened our store in LA 3 months ago. And it was the night after we opened LA, and I woke up and I was like, wow, this is the first Sunday where you could get a Matcha Bar matcha in both coasts of the country. And I went back and looked at our first 5-year plan, and we were like 4 months off from like what we had dreamed up we would do. And granted, like sure, you're 4 months, but if you have like the foresight to like make a plan and then stick to it, like that's like the most important thing.
That's awesome, yeah.
Anything else?
I think that's like great in it.
Okay, cool.
This was like a cool, like we get like an interview with like a guy who likes